All right, welcome to Oh, What a Show. I'm your host, Paul Valle. With me, as always, from Utah Street Report, just above me is Ryan Blake. To his right is Jon Shearer from the Sideline Sports Network. And you'll notice just below John is Jonathan Mayo from MLB Pipeline and MLB.com. Today is our draft preview show, and Jonathan is kind enough to join us for the first half of our show today. Jonathan, thanks for taking a few minutes for us. I know you're a busy, busy man these days.
I
Let's just
appreciate that and happy to be here.
Yeah, and we're happy to have you here. So let's jump right into this draft coming up in 6 days. The Orioles have the number one overall pick in the draft. When you and I last spoke not too long ago, you said they had narrowed it down to about 5 different players who they could take number one overall. For our listeners, who are those 5 players, and has that list thinned out even more as we approach the draft?
I'll take the second part first. It is not, and my understanding is that they will keep that list pretty much probably minutes before they pick. It's kind of how Mike Elias and company like to do things. But the 5 are Drew Jones. That's Andrew Jones's son, high schooler from Florida. Tamar Johnson, from Georgia. Tamar Johnson, a high school infielder, one of the best pure high school bats we've seen in a long time. Also from Georgia, Jackson Holliday, that's Matt Holliday's son, is a shortstop, high school shortstop from Oklahoma. Elijah Green is on the list, but I think he's very much on the outside looking in, but he's still one of those 5. And then you have Brooks Lee, is really the one college name that is still, on the list. He is the shortstop. I think most people think he ends up at third, but the best pure college hitter in the class. He's coming off a very big year at Cal Poly, where he played for his dad. Is that 5? Did I get them all?
You got them
Okay.
all. You got them all. And Brooks Lee would be a perfect fit in Baltimore. We had him on a show that I used to be a producer of not too long ago. He said his dad actually named him after Brooks Robinson, so that slides right in there. Now, Jonathan, in 2020, the Orioles went underslot with the number 2 overall pick in Heston Kjerstad, and in 2021, they went underslot at number 5 with Colton Cowser. What are the chances that the Orioles go that route again? And if they do, is there a prime candidate that they would take should they go that way?
Yeah, without handicapping it too much, because I don't really know. Mike Elias keeps things very, very close to the chest, and so I don't really know. I'd say it's about 50-50 in terms of whether they just take the best player, which is what they did in 2019. They took Adley Rutschman, and an argument can be made that because their bonus pool is so huge, they could take the best player and still have money to be aggressive later on, especially because they have that extra pick. The one guy who I think would make the most sense in terms of that would be Tamar Johnson, because he is very, very talented. But there is a chance that if he doesn't go 1, he could go 5, he could go 7 or 8. And I think if you're negotiating, you might be able to cut a deal with him and save a good amount of money. You say, like, listen, we'll sign you for whatever the slot at number 4 is, or things like that. And he is very, very talented. Like, I don't want to sort of undersell Tamar Johnson as this like huge bargain signing. Both Kjerstad and Cowser were highly regarded college performers.
Right.
Obviously, no one could have predicted what was going to happen to Heston Kjerstad after the fact, but it wouldn't be that huge of a reach. Tamar Johnson is a top 5 talent. He's certainly a top 10 pick. But to take a 5'8" high school infielder who's likely a second baseman,
right,
you really need to have strength and convictions to do that. Now, I've seen him hit. I've talked to scouts who have seen him hit. This guy can hit. I mean, he's got a chance to hit. He's got a chance to hit for power, but he's not that big. He's not like an 80 runner or anything like that, but he might be an 80 hitter when all is said and done. So I think that makes him, more interesting than your typical kind of money saver. And, this year isn't like last year where there wasn't a huge consensus. So the Pirates felt that they could take the guy they really liked as the separator and save money on Henry Davis. Drew Jones is the best player in this draft class. There's no question. And then there's an argument after that. So if Drew Jones says, I'm not even, I wouldn't sign for slot, now the Orioles will have a decision. They could just take Drew Jones and see if he'll walk away from $7.5 million or whatever it is they're willing to offer him. Or they could then go and cut a deal for a player who's really not that far behind. They're not taking a guy who's a end of the first round pick and taking him 1-1.
So when you mentioned about money, the Orioles just made a trade for cash considerations, which was an odd trade, trading for money when you only have a $29 million payroll. Now that's different when it comes to like the draft stuff, but you mentioned about taking the best player and then being aggressive with money. So do you think the Orioles are kind of tipping their hand a little bit in that regard with the recent trade?
No, because that won't be draft bonus pool money.
That won't go into that?
No, it can't. You have a set amount for each slot that adds up to, and I think they're about 15. No, but it's somewhat related because in all likelihood, if I had to guess, it's either just going to be money or it's going to be international bonus money, which is tradable. So right. I know Orioles fans are still getting used to the idea that the Orioles actually do things on the international market. That's relatively new, but this group does, and so they could use that money for the if it is what I think it's going to be for the next international signing class.
Jonathan, you can give me a quick yes or no on this if you want. We don't have to spend too much time because this isn't a name that you mentioned in the final five, but a name that has stood out to me as someone whose stock has risen pretty significantly these past couple months is Cam Collier. Was he ever in consideration? Is that remotely likely at all? That's just a name that I had heard thrown around as a potential one.
No. You said I could give you a yes or no question.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's very talented. He's Luke Collier's son. His name is floated up again as high as 4 to the Pirates. That would be a deal. When you hear his name in the top 10, he probably would sign for less than whatever the slot is. Once you get around 10, but he's really good. And he's only 17. He did what Bryce Harper did. He should be going into his senior year of high school next year. So he's not even just like a little bit ahead. He's 2 years ahead, really hit well at Chipola, and has been kind of holding his own in Cape Cod League at age 17.
Wow.
So he's not putting up huge numbers, but he can really hit. And the age thing will a lot of teams will be interested because a lot of teams, I don't know if you've heard things about teams putting players through a model. And a lot of times if a guy is old for his age, for his level, like if it's a high schooler who's 19, Brett Beatty is a good example. A lot of teams wouldn't take Brett Beatty in the 2019 draft because he was old for high school, and they thought, well, sure, he's going to dominate against 17-year-olds. He's 19. I don't really love that, but there are a lot of teams who just won't count a guy. Ken Collier is helped by the fact that he's so young and competed so well.
Now, you mentioned when we talked about the 5 players that are on the Orioles list right now, the first 4 guys you mentioned were high schoolers, and the top talent in this draft is all high school players. Now, this regime usually likes to go after college bats. However, Mike Elias did just say recently in an interview that he also loves to develop high school bats. Can the Orioles justify taking a college bat number 1 overall when the top talent is clearly at the high school level?
I think they can because it might depend on what they do after that. They've shown the ability to find. I mean, who's the best hitting prospect in the Orioles system right now?
Probably Colton Cowser. I would have to say.
I would argue that it's Gunnar Henderson, who was a high school draftee. In 2019, I thought you were going to walk right into my argument for me, Paul.
I'm sorry about that.
It's all good. I mean, that's what makes this an interesting thing to talk about. But he's now in AAA and he's 21, and that's the benefit of having a high school guy. So if the right high school talent is there, and there are guys, in that second tier. So if you feel like you want to get that college bat because you have this pool of talent at the upper levels, and Brooks Lee is going to join that group sooner rather than later because things are starting to turn around, you can make that argument. And then there might be that tier 2 level of hitter that they really like. Kobe Mayo is another high school guy that they got later on. So that's, I think, where the high school bat, that's my nephew, of course. Wink, wink. They're willing to find those guys later if they want to. They also may think, well, we've done a pretty good job of developing some bats. We could use some arms, so go after some high school arms, which they've been a little less successful with just because of some injuries, the Carter Boundlers of the world. But that doesn't mean that they're going to sort of shy away from doing that if there's a good fit.
This is kind of a good segue. I wanted to ask you, you talk about Kobe Mayo as your nephew, which is a great running gag. I love that.
What do you mean?
The Orioles took him in the 4th round after taking Kierstead, saved a little bit of money, and was able to get him later on. Not in terms of the tools that Kobe Mayo has, but in terms of that type of player, the first round talent who could potentially be bought in the later rounds, who's considered a tough sign. Is there a player like that in this draft? And if so, can you name drop a guy or two?
I'm trying to call up the draft list.
Sorry, I had you go way down there.
No, it's okay. I think one of the things is we don't really know. All the top guys are going to go. Mm-hmm. A lot of people I've seen people written articles, people have asked on Twitter, like, couldn't Drew Jones just demand $10 million and force his way down to the Mets because the Mets have 2 first-round picks? The answer is no, because somebody's just going to take him and call his bluff. And he's not going to sign for $10 million. But if he signs for $7 million, is he going to walk away from that? There are more arms than high school bats that I know of in terms of that sort of signability factor. It's kind of weird looking at some of the high school hitters a little bit further down, Jet Williams, Tucker Toman. These are all guys that kind of belong in the back end of the 1st round. Here's a name for you, Henry Bolt. He's a
strong baseball name.
It's a very good baseball name. Very toolsy high school outfielder. We have him number 40 on our list. He's from Northern California. He's got all 5 tools. I've heard that he's going to be a tough sign. He could be one that, if they believe in the tools, that they might decide to target. Keep in mind that a lot of times the high school guys that they've taken have had I guess Gunnar Henderson was kind of that ilk, like really toolsy, physical specimen. You weren't exactly sure. Malcolm Moore is another one, a high school catcher from California. And I know people are like, why would you take a catcher? You got Adley Rutschman, but one of the good things is you have Adley Rutschman. You could take an 18-year-old high school catcher who might take a little longer. He can take as much time as he needs, and then you cross the bridge when
they also don't want Rutschman to be the catcher forever, right? I mean, they what I mean? Like, they don't want to wear him down. They don't want to wear him down, like, you know what I mean? Like, I've heard that they want him to eventually transition out of the catcher spot. Not because he's not a great catcher, but you don't want to wear him down. Like, we saw what happened with Matt Wieters. He kind of wore down eventually.
Adley Rutschman is a much better hitter than Matt Wieters, and even similarly coming out. Your point is well made, and yes, they will probably find ways to DH Adley Rutschman. Maybe as his career goes on,
because we've already seen it a little bit here and there as he's.
Well, sure, he's not going to catch it. He's not Yadier Molina. No one is. He's not going to catch 150 games a year. But I don't think that Adley Rutschman is ever going to play another primary position other than catcher. Now, maybe by the time Malcolm Moore, minted Oriole, is ready for the big leagues, you're ready to share. But you always can use guys in trades, and that's one of the things that once you build up a farm system and you have this pool of talent, you start that log jam. You can't keep everybody, and that's how you can kind of.
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, you help perpetuate it. Yeah.
Now, Jonathan, you mentioned Brooks Lee a little bit ago, and Sig Mejdal is a big Brooks Lee guy. Is Sig? How much influence does Sig have in that draft room, if you're privy to that information at all? And would that make Brooks Lee a more likely pick for the Orioles should it come down to it?
I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, obviously Sig is involved in lots of facets of how the Orioles do things. Mm-hmm. I know he likes hitters, and it doesn't surprise me that he would like Brooks Lee. I mean, there's nothing not to like about Brooks Lee. He can really, really hit. He's a coach on the field. I don't think it's going to take him very long to be ready for the big leagues. I think the one thing that people may pause is he had this gruesome injury that required a surgery that hadn't been done much before. Mm-hmm. Like the expert in it had only done it 3 or 4 times. Oh, wow. So you pause, but he completely remade and retooled his body to become the player he is now. He has hit everywhere. Like, it doesn't matter where he's been. Cape Cod League with Cal Poly, he is going to hit. So again, like sort of with the point, maybe even with like Tamar Johnson, this isn't like we're going the safe route. Like, I think Brooks Lee has a chance to be a special big league hitter.
Yeah, and the Orioles are going to be well served no matter, it seems, no matter who they take off that top 5 list that they have there. And there's a reason that they're all favored to go number 1 in one way or another. Now, if you're just joining us, we have Jonathan Mayo from MLB Pipeline, MLB.com with us. Just a couple more minutes here with Jonathan because we know he's got to get running. The Orioles have 4 of the top 67 picks and 6 of the top 107. Their cupboard's pretty bare after Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall as far as pitching is concerned in their farm system. There's some legitimate college pitchers maybe coming off an injury, or a guy like a Kumar Rocker who the Orioles could take with one of those early picks. Definitely not in the first round, but maybe the second round pick, the second compensation pick. Somebody they could take there who could really help this system.
I mean, the short answer is yes. Kumar Rocker is going to go in the first round, I think, when all is said and done. There's a chance that he could be around for that first comp pick. Mm-hmm. For the Orioles, would they consider him? I don't know. I haven't seen the medical reports. Whoever takes Kumar Rocker is going to have to feel comfortable enough to kind of roll the dice there. There are a bunch of pitchers who could be out there. Connor Prelip, who's kind of back from Tommy John surgery and thrown through at the draft combine. Peyton Pallette is a guy who just had Tommy John surgery. So it's like guys are just coming back. Carson Wisenhunt is a guy who was suspended this year, was pitching in the Cape. All these guys, like Prelip, Rocker, and Wisenhunt especially, we've heard their names in the first round, but teams could back away. Wisenhunt is healthy. So it's just a question of understanding the suspension, and he was suspended for a performance enhancer, but I don't know whether it was something he took accidentally, or whether so I don't know any of those, but those are questions that teams will have to answer to want to take him. Any of those guys could be around. I mean, Dylan Lesko was the best high school pitcher in the draft before he had Tommy John surgery. I think it's highly unlikely he makes it to the comp round, but a high school right-hander just had Tommy John surgery. If things fall differently, a team that was like, oh, we are going to take him, this is a little safer when it comes down to making the decision. He is the kind of guy who could kind of fall into that area. Reggie Crawford is a name. I don't know why I'm pulling this one out of thin air, but he's a UConn lefty who's barely pitched. But when he did, he was throwing 100 miles an hour and he's left-handed.
Wow.
I don't know what he is. No one knows what he is. Would a team with a lot of extra picks take a flyer on a guy like that? Because worst case, you put him in the bullpen. He was pretty athletic. He was a two-way player who didn't focus a ton on pitching. Pitched for Team USA and then blew out. So, for UConn, be an interesting pick. And I'm not sure what he wants to do, but he's a guy that hasn't been talked about as much, but was a guy who everyone wanted to see in the spring had he not blown out in the fall, to see what he did over the course of a full college season, because no one had seen it.
And then, with what we've seen from this Orioles organization, with how they've developed these pitchers and how they've gotten the most out of a lot of these pitchers who were waiver claims, like a guy like Felix Bautista, for example, who's been in the minors his entire adult life, and these guys are thriving at the major league level. It seems like they can take a left-hander that throws 100 miles an hour and probably do something pretty good with him.
Right. At the very least, he's a setup guy, a middle guy. I mean, but Again, there's so little track record that you want to talk about rolling the dice. Mm-hmm. But when you have flexibility, I mean, he may be like, I want to go and rehab with the pro team and sign for underslot. I haven't the slightest idea. But those are some of the guys that they'll have to consider. And, especially with that first comp pick, I think that's going to be like, who's going to float down to us that we thought was going to go ahead of us? There will always be. And it may end up being some healthy high school left-handers, right? Like a Jackson Ferris or a Robbie Snelling, one of those guys, could end up being there. And so that's a kind of a good spot. They're not waiting like all the way to the second round, or they don't have to wait a really long time. They can kind of see who gets to them. And I think one of the things that they fell prey to when they went below slot was trying to get specific players to them. And hopefully they've learned that doesn't necessarily work, because a team ahead of them might take that guy, even if you think he's going to get to you. So maybe you pinpoint that guy, but have a plan B and C. Last year the Pirates really only thought they were going to get 2 of those high schoolers that they got. They ended up getting a third, because they were ready to adjust on the fly based on who was available and what they were willing to sign for.
Yeah, and the Orioles, they certainly have enough early picks and all of that money to do some pretty big things 6 days from today. Of course, the one pick that everybody's talking about is the number 1 overall pick. Jonathan, we're not letting you leave, getting off the hook here. You're looking into your crystal ball. Who is the guy come Sunday that the Orioles take number 1 overall?
Well, I am working on what feels like my 420th mock draft. It'll come out probably Wednesday night into Thursday, and I'm sticking with Drew Jones. I'm kind of between Drew Jones and Tamar Johnson now. I think if they're going to go the save money route, it's going to be one of those two. And I'm just thinking, because of the size of their bonus pool, and like in 2019, they took the best guy at 1-1. They're going to take the best guy, and Drew Jones is the best guy.
I think people in Baltimore are going to be pretty excited about that. Jonathan, thank you so much for taking some time for us. We know you're a busy man, so we're going to let you get out of here. Have a great week, and hopefully you get some rest coming up here soon, and you can kind of put this draft behind you.
Here's hoping. Thanks, guys.
All right,
Thanks,
man.
Jonathan.
Take care.
See you, John.
All right, from MLB Pipeline and MLB.com, one of the top draft experts in the country, joining us on the show today, Jonathan Mayo. Special thanks to him for coming on the show and taking a few minutes out of his busy schedule to talk with us on Oh, What a Show today. Guys, final thoughts on the draft segment that we just had. I know, Ryan, you didn't get to ask your question about Taron Vavra and Jordan Westbrook, but you gave us a lot of stuff in there.
Well, had I known we were going to go an extra 5 minutes with him, I would have stayed in order with the list we had. So I apologize for skipping ahead, but I saw a couple minutes left, and I wanted to get that question about, is there another Kobe Mayo in this draft? So I skipped over Brooks Lee, and I didn't even want to bring up Kevin Parada. But I think that was good. We got a lot of good insight from him. Like you said, Oriole fans will be thrilled to hear that he thinks Drew Jones is still the pick. Obviously, we don't know that for sure. Neither does he, but if there's somebody to ask and you feel pretty confident with, Jonathan Mayo's the guy. So we appreciate him having him on.
If he's anything like his dad, my gosh. I mean, his dad was absolutely amazing. It makes me feel old. Like, having watched Matt Holliday and, Andrew Jones, and now their sons are getting drafted and stuff like that. That just makes me feel really old. But if he's anything like his dad, he's going to be a hell of a ball player. And if the Orioles get him, that's a steal. I know he's number 1 overall, but a guy like that, with what the Orioles have already in their organization. Let me ask you this, Paul. If they go for Drew Jones, do you think that seals the deal on trading away some of the outfielders that they already have? Even though Jones is a couple years, he's not going to come up to MLB right away. But does that kind of seal the deal? Because, that just crowds the organization even more.
That deal's already been sealed to begin with, because they have so many outfielders for only 3 spots. But look, and this was actually going to be my final thought for the end of the show, but since you asked me now, I'll do it now. Look, you draft Drew Jones, and that's a guy that you're going to have play Major League Baseball for your organization. Now, look, you don't typically trade away number 1 overall picks. The Braves did it. The Arizona Diamondbacks did it with Dansby Swanson a few years back. They got I can't remember what was the name of the pitcher that they got.
I think wasn't that the Shelby Miller trade?
Shelby Miller.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was
Shelby Miller. Ended up being terrible.
Well, Shelby Miller was a legitimate pitcher when they made that trade, and then he fell apart. But I don't think the Orioles are going to end up trading a number 1 overall pick. If Andrew Jones' son, if Drew Jones is in this organization, he's playing center field for them in a few years. So it may seal the deal on trading somebody that Orioles fans don't want the Orioles to trade, like an Austin Hayes or even a Cedric Mullins, if he can get you the biggest return, because Drew Jones will play for this organization. And John, you said if he's anything like his father. Well, if he's anything like his father, then he's going to be playing in the World Series, having a multi-homer game at the age of 19. So I would take that 10 days out of 10. So Yeah, Andrew Jones for me is a pick. Although hearing what people have been saying about Tamar Johnson, how that bat is the best bat they've seen coming out of high school in decades, I could get on board with that pick. And if it saves the Orioles a little bit of money to go out and get maybe a first round talent who wasn't likely to sign otherwise, I could be okay with that. And honestly, if they take any of those 5 guys that Jonathan Mayo listed for us, I could find a reason to get excited about them.
Yeah.
So it's
I
an
was
exciting time. So Ryan, go ahead.
I was just going to say the same thing. I can talk myself into any of those guys. I know Elias really likes Jackson Holiday, so maybe he leans that direction. Tamar Johnson, if that's an underslot pick, that's a damn good underslot pick
Yeah.
right there. Tamar Johnson absolutely rakes, heck of a player. Drew Jones, it seems like the consensus 1-1 at this point, but yeah, I mean, even Elijah Green, a name who has kind of slipped when this time last year, Oriole fans were saying, "Oh, can't wait to have Elijah Green as an Oriole next year." Things change and things have changed, and now everyone's clamoring for Drew Jones. But yeah, any of those guys he mentioned, I could certainly talk myself into, and I'd be thrilled about.
Well, yeah, and the thing with Elijah Green is that he has what's scaring people off is he has a lot of swing and miss in his swing. But I've heard many draft analysts tell me he's got the highest ceiling of anybody in this draft. They think that Drew Jones is the most likely to get to a Acuna, Tatis Jr., Juan Soto type of level. But they think that ultimately Elijah Green, like he's the most likely to get there, but Elijah Green has the highest ceiling.
Right.
So it's one of those things where look, Elijah Green's probably the 5th guy on my list at this point, whereas last year at this time he was the number 1 guy on my list, and it's amazing how things change. But if Drew Jones is that can't miss guy. If it's Jackson Holiday, Matt Holiday was such a solid player.
Oh,
and such
he
a
was
good,
fantastic.
he was never like an MVP guy, but that was a dude who hit 320 plus homers, 100 RBIs.
He was pretty damn good with the Rockies, and he was pretty damn good with the Cardinals. So like he had like you said, he had a solid career. I thought he was fantastic. He had a lot of great years in him. So yeah, if he's anything like his dad, sign me up for that.
If he's supposed to go number 1 or number 2 overall, he's probably supposed to be better than his dad, and I would take that any day of the week. Now, what all of us will take any day of the week is some Orioles baseball right now. Guys, Orioles 8-game winning streak. They are 43 and 44. They are 1 game below 500. It's July 11th. Guys, it's July 11th, and they are 1 game below 500. It took them, 130 games to get to 43 wins last year? 140 games, something like that. And they're 2 games out of that 3rd wild card spot. Don't look at the American League East Division standings because you're going to see them in last place. Look at the fact that they're 2 games out of a wild card spot. They're only 4 games behind the 2nd-placed Tampa Bay Rays. They can get there, guys. They believe in themselves. They believe that they have a chance to win every day that they go to the ballpark. What are we feeling about this team right now? I was at the ballpark yesterday for that 9-5 victory over the Angels to complete the 4-game sweep. There's something special happening in Baltimore right now.
I do have to say, not to interrupt you, Ryan, I saw you were about to talk, but the Orioles are on an 8-game win streak. Let's not forget, it should be a 10-game win streak. I mean, they blew 2 back-to-back games. They had the lead, and they blew the save. Now, that's not to knock Jorge Lopez, but they won 8 in a row, and then they blew 2 games right before that to Minnesota. So, really, this team has been basically the better team because they won 8 in a row and should have won those 2. The last time they had a game where you're like, oh, they definitely should have lost was at the Mariners, June 29th. They got blown out by the Mariners. That was the last time you could say, yeah, the Orioles weren't the better team. Now, you could say that about their miracle comebacks. I get it. But that Mariners game was the last time they really got blown out. All their other losses, 1-run loss, 1-run loss, 2-run loss. They got shut out 2-0. Like other than that, they've been in every game. It's been 1 or 2 runs basically. So this seems better than the 8-game win streak. Don't forget that they're even better than I mean, I think that's crazy to think about.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened in that 9-2 Mariners game. That's how exciting this 8-game winning streak has been.
Right.
I have forgotten everything that happened before it. It doesn't matter to me anymore. This team is ready to make noise in the American League. Now, whether or not they stay as hot as they are and make a legitimate run at the wild card is yet to be determined. But at this point, I don't really care if they do or not. Obviously, I'd love to see them make the playoffs, but we came into the season with our expectations so low that just to see them playing at this level and sustaining it for so long, they have a well above 500 record since Adley Rutschman was called up.
Mm-hmm.
That in itself is very exciting. Now, whether or not they falter a little bit down the stretch, they very well could. They're a young team. They don't have a lot of experience in meaningful games, but there's a lot to be excited about. I bought my home run chain the other night. I got my floppy hat up on my lamp. So I mean, yeah, it's I didn't stop smiling for about 2 hours after the Angels walk off the other night.
Can I say something to reply to Ryan? What
Yeah.
Ryan said about the beginning of the season? Well, everybody's knocking Busseroni for knocking the Orioles, but really, like, how many of us at the beginning of the season predicted that the Orioles would be this? Not one
Nobody.
of us.
Nobody.
Nobody. So, like, as much as I've been thinking about this, as much as people knocking Busseroni, and I get it, none of us, not one of us. You go back to our show when we all predicted what the Orioles would be. We all predicted they would be terrible. Like, every one of us thought that. So, like, let's just pump the brakes. Let's not get too high on the Orioles. Let's not get too low. Like Ryan said, let's just enjoy the ride, see what happens. If we don't make the playoffs, it's okay. Like, we should be happy that the rebuild is here, that it's working, that what Mike Elias said is coming true. It's the exact blueprint of what the Astros did, and it's working perfectly. Like, let's not get too low. Like, whenever we start losing, because we will lose at some point. Like, let's not jump off the
Maybe tomorrow.
bandwagon. Like, let's not jump off the bandwagon and be like, oh, well, the sky is falling. Like, it's okay. Like, we're in good hands.
Well, yeah, and like look, the Orioles right before this 8-game winning streak had a 4-game losing streak. Now, 2 of those games, as you alluded to, John, were the blown ninth inning saves by Jorge Lopez, the 2 walk-offs by Minnesota. But you look at the Orioles' record over the last 28 games. They are 19-9, and that includes that 4-game losing streak in there where they really should be 21-7. Since Adley Rutschman got here, they're 27-20. This team, since I think in their last 85 games, I saw they're 43-42. So this is a ball club that they're on the upward trend right now. It's just what's going to happen the rest of the season, because they have these 2 games against the Cubs, and these are both very winnable games for the Orioles to help them maybe get to 10 games, 10 wins in a row, get a game or 2 above 500. But then they have a 10-game stretch that's sandwiched around the All-Star break, where they have 3 in Tampa Bay, then they have the All-Star break, and then they come home for 3 with the Yankees, 4 with the Rays. Yep. Now that precedes a 9-game stretch where they play Cincinnati, Texas, and Pittsburgh. Where are the Orioles going to be when they get to that 9-game stretch with those 3 subpar teams? Ryan, what's it going to take for them to stay in this next 10-game stretch?
The pitching has to stay consistent, and Brandon Hyde said the other day, this team has had so many great at-bats late in ball games, and so one of the reporters, I believe, asked him what's the next step, and he said to treat at-bats early in the game like they're high leverage at the end. And that's really going to help the offense click, especially if fans are showing up to the stadium. Now, I know we're going on the road. We'll be in Wrigley Field. We'll be in Tampa Bay. We're not home until after the All-Star break, but when you have a team that has thrived in these situations where it's do or die, you really do need to treat every at-bat like that if you want to consistently win ball games. And I think that's what's going to take on top of the starting pitching. Tyler Wells, Dean Kramer both faltered a little bit their most recent outings, although Kramer bounced back just the other day. But the pitching has to stay consistent. Spencer Watkins needs to continue doing what he has been. And his peripherals aren't very good. I don't think Spencer Watkins is as good as he's performed in the box score. But those are guys who have stepped up really big, especially since Grayson Rodriguez went down with an injury. Obviously, we've been without John Means for most of the season. So, is DL Hall going to be here? We don't know. There's a lot of question marks. But this is a team that has shown they're capable of beating the Rays. They've already won 2 series against them this year after winning 1 from 2019 through last season. So, I'm excited to see them hang tough. But I have to say, Paul and John, the one thing that is kind of annoying about feeling like a competitive team again is the losses are going to bother me so much more.
Yeah,
So
right.
I hope
They
it's
are.
like
They are.
it's going to feel like a Ravens game every week, So, hopefully they're able to stay hot, but I'm just trying to enjoy this ride and hopefully it continues as we get into some tough divisional games.
Yeah, and now you're looking at a team that, again, 1 game under 500, 2 games out of a wild card spot. What does that mean for them at the trade deadline? Now, when Mike Elias was asked this the other day, he said he's still taking a global approach to this, which means, without saying, it's still business as usual, that we still know where we are with this rebuild and we're still trying to provide for the future. Now, I don't think that just because the Orioles are in playoff contention on July 11th means that they should go and sell some top prospects to get some elite starting pitching in here. What I do think that they should do is if they can find a way to package somebody like an Anthony Santander with a reliever like maybe a Dylan Tate or a Keegan Aiken, and you can get a guy who's kind of on the outs like Blake Snell with the Padres or David Peterson with the Mets with Scherzer and DeGrom coming back and with Taijuan Walker having the season he's having. Or maybe you pay a little bit more to go get a Pablo Lopez from the Marlins. Now that might take one of those outfield prospects that John was talking about that the Orioles might have to trade. But I think that you can go and you can get somebody to help this rotation that's going to be under team control for a little bit without selling the farm. What do you guys think they're going to do at the trade deadline if they're still this close to playoff contention on August 2nd?
Well, it's interesting that you bring this up now. I have tweet notifications on for MLB trade rumors, and 6 minutes ago they tweeted out a link. Should the Orioles rethink their trade deadline approach? So we're right on the same page there. But I kind of feel like I haven't written an article for Utah Street Report in a while, and I kind of feel like the Orioles could. I don't really know how to phrase this, but they could be buyers by being sellers, if that makes sense. I think there are pieces that they could unload to get back younger, controllable pieces, and maybe you replace those guys you trade with a Kyle Stowers, a Terran Vavra, a DL Hall. So I have to rethink that thought a little bit, but maybe keep an eye out for an article in Utah Street Report in the next day or two.
Yeah, John.
The way I see it is, let's just let the next 20 days or so play out. Like, it's July 11th. We don't know. I mean, Paul, you talked about the 10-game stretch that the Orioles are going into after they play the Cubs, sandwiched around the All-Star break. That will determine a lot of what happens with the trade deadline for us. If the Orioles go 2-8 in that stretch, you know that they're going to be like, okay, like this was a nice run, but it's back to the bottom. We're going to sell. We're not going to buy into making the playoffs this year because we just went 2-8 versus the Yankees and Rays. So I would like to see just kind of like if they can keep this up against better competition. Not to knock the Angels or Rangers, but do it against the Yankees. I'm not saying beat the Yankees, but be competitive.
They have the best record in baseball.
Yeah. You're probably not winning that series, but beat the Rays in the 3-game set, split with them in my opinion, in the 4-game set. If you can do that, you lose the Yankees 2 out of 3, I get it. Split with the Cubs. Then I'd be like, okay, maybe you can go ahead with if you're gonna buy, like if that's what you want to do. But you can't get your butt kicked after what you did to the Angels and Rangers, or way less competition. You got to show that you can handle these higher teams. They've done it before, but now stakes are starting to get a little bit higher. And like I said, with this trade deadline, like, does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And 2-8 in that 10-game stretch is very possible.
That's very Orioles-esque.
Yeah, the Orioles are 4-9 against the Yankees this year. They're 4-9 against them. So I'm just glad that they've only got 2 series left with them the rest of the way because they're playing out of their minds right now, and so are the Orioles. And nothing like the Yankees coming to town to kind of make you feel bad about yourself. So look. I think if the Orioles are sitting at like 53 and because in the 5th game of that 9-game stretch against the Reds, Rangers, and Pirates, that's the trade deadline. If the Orioles are sitting 53 and 50 at that date, I think you have to do something that doesn't destroy what you're building, but shows the fan base, hey, we are very aware of what this team is doing right now, and we want to try and do at least something to help us stay in this all year. Maybe it doesn't put us over the top, but it keeps us in this. And to that point, I am backing off. I don't think they're trading Trey Mancini. I don't think he's getting traded. I think, and Mark DeRosa said it on Friday on MLB Central. He is more valuable to your team and your fan base than any piece you're going to get back for him, because nobody's giving you a lot for Trey Mancini, and you have a need for DH in 2023. Now, maybe Heston Kjerstad makes that difficult for you by the second half of 2023, but going into next year, you don't have somebody else that can be your full-time DH that's as good as Trey Mancini right now. I think that the Orioles need to hang on to him, maybe even give him a little bit of an extension to show a sign of good faith to a homegrown talent who's the heart of your organization right now.
I also think, and I go back to that when Mancini hit that walk-off the other day, they did the interview and Mancini almost teared up. Like when they asked him questions, like you could hear in his voice, he almost started crying. Like that said a lot to me. That said,
the emotion that he showed on that,
the emotion
hit, and
that
then
he showed,
hugging his teammate on the in between first and
I
second.
think that's what DeRosa was kind of alluding to.
Yeah, that's the heart. That's the heart and soul of your team.
Something you can't measure in the box score, right?
Right, Ryan.
Yeah, I don't really have a follow-up on that, to be honest. I love Trey Mancini. I have no idea what a trade market for him would look like. I think positionally speaking, especially when you're trying to keep Rutschman in the lineup almost every day, and obviously he can't catch every day, fans have been frustrated lately with Rutschman's days off. They seem to be a little bit too plentiful. And I don't, it may have been you, Paul, who tweeted this last week. The reason that keeps happening is because we have both Ryan Mountcastle and Trey Mancini on the roster. Now, I get your point, and I agree with you that there is a need for a full-time DH moving forward. I'm just not sure that positionally Mancini is, he and Mountcastle are almost mirror images of each other in terms of production.
Right.
And that's the one thing that bothers me. And when the only place you can put him in the field where they'll be serviceable is first base, I think, at one point you have to cut ties. Now, I don't mean for this to say I want the Orioles to trade Mancini.
It's just business.
Do I think they should trade him? Maybe, depending on the return. Will it break my heart if they do? Absolutely. But at some point, kind of like we've been talking about this outfield logjam for quite some time, the Orioles are starting to get one at first base DH, and so they're going to have to do something about it.
Yeah, and look, the point remains, and we both wrote articles about this at the beginning of the season, Ryan, that Trey Mancini doesn't really have a spot on this roster in the future. Look, they're kind of handling Rutschman with kid gloves a little bit. If playing 5 days out of 7 is handling a guy with kid gloves, but this guy, make no mistake about it, he's going to catch 140 games next year. He's going to catch 130 to 140 games. So you're really looking at 20, 30 opportunities for him to DH next year, because I don't think he's going to be playing first base at the big league level anytime soon. That's 130, 140 games where you need somebody to DH, and whether that's Mountcastle sometimes, whether that's Mancini sometimes, and then maybe one of those guys needs a day off when Rutschman's catching, and so Mountcastle needs a day off, or maybe Mancini doesn't hit this guy as well as Mountcastle does. These guys are going to need their days off. There's going to be plenty of playing time for whoever's going to be that full-time DH next year. And look, Trey can go play first base. He can be serviceable on. Look, we watched Nelson Cruz and Mark Trumbo play right field for the Orioles here. Okay, so if they need to put Trey Mancini out in right field or left field 10 times next year, I think they can live with that to get the production they're going to get from his bat. Now, where I think that the Orioles have a need right now is in their infield, and getting Arias back is nice. Mateo, look, he had a double and a triple in yesterday's game, but when's the last time you saw him have multiple extra base hits or even multiple hits in a game? The guy's hitting 195.
Yeah.
But he's in the lineup because he's fast and he's got a great glove at shortstop. He gets to everything.
He steals a lot of bases.
Yeah. Odor
when he gets on base.
Yeah.
Odor is that guy, man, and anybody who follows me on Twitter knows how hard this is for me, because I didn't like the signing, and I still don't want a guy that hits 205 in my everyday lineup. But you hear how the team talks about him. He's the guy who's kind of like the glue
It's
for
like
the
an
chemistry.
Energizer bunny. Yeah.
Right, he's the glue in that clubhouse. You heard Ryan Mountcastle on the Peacock broadcast actually saying that Odor's the goofiest guy in the clubhouse. This team loves him, and while he doesn't get many hits, the hits that he does get are in huge situations every single time. Can you justify getting rid of Odor because for what it might do to the chemistry and the makeup of this team? Am I suddenly getting on board with keeping this guy on the roster for now just because it means so much to team chemistry?
No, not at all. I mean, if you get rid of Mancini, it's going to mean a lot more than getting rid of Odor. And you're talking about potentially getting rid of Mancini. It's business. Like, you can't go by, well, guys' feelings are hurt. Like, it's business, and you got to do what's best. You can't look at the bottom. If Rutschman doesn't play in a day, the bottom four of the lineup are basically the Mendoza line or worse. Below. That's four of your 9 hitters are hitting 200 or below. If Rutschman, I keep saying his name wrong. If he doesn't play, then almost half your lineup is 200 or below. Like, How can you live with that? You can't keep having Odor, a guy that's barely hitting 200 in your lineup. Like, it kills me every time I look at the bottom of the lineup. It's just nobody can hit a baseball.
Yeah, and the thing with Odor, though, he's the one guy that when you look at the lineup, and again, it kills me to say, I don't dislike the guy. I just don't have a place on any team that I think is worth anything to have a guy that hits 205 in your lineup. But he's the one guy that when you look at that lineup, you're like, all right, he could probably go deep tonight if they need him to, you know? But Ryan, go ahead. Oh, did we lose Ryan? Ryan, did you freeze up?
There he is.
I thought you guys froze. It must be me. It's such a weird situation because he's not a good baseball player, but damn if he isn't fun.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, yeah, it is hard to justify, I think, getting rid of a guy like that just because, he came in and he's energized this team. And whether it's him or Robinson Chirinos or somebody else who's been the veteran presence, Jordan Lyles, who has helped these young guys, keep their feet below them. You said it, Paul. The way these guys always talk about Odor, and even post game interviews, unprompted, they'll bring up Rougned Odor and how he's always on the top step of the dugout. I mean, you want that guy around, but I don't really want him in the lineup. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, put him on the. You could put him on the bench, and he's a nice pinch hit spot. I mean,
nice
like you said,
who gets a couple starts a week at second base. Maybe you move Arias over to second base, and you let somebody else get some time.
That's a
over
good
third.
idea.
But he'd have to be. I guess he wouldn't have to be. I guess to stay at the big league level, he'd take whatever role.
Yeah, not many teams are gonna pick him up.
Look,
right.
the Orioles have a lot of payroll flexibility. Give him an extension. Give him a few $1,000,000 a year, and tell him you're going to be a bench guy, but we're going to love the heck out of you.
Yeah, I don't know that you can justify that.
Well, I know. I'm mostly being tongue in cheek.
Here's the thing here. They love Anthony Santander too, and we know that he's basically a lock to be gone, right? But you have to look at who they have coming up, and a lot of these guys have played with Kyle Stowers, and a lot of these guys have played with Terrin Vavra, and so it's not like these guys are going to come in to replace Santander and Odor, and the Orioles are just going to shun them. It's not like they're going to turn a cold shoulder to them. They're going to embrace these guys, welcome them in, and they're going to provide something else to this ball club, and maybe a more consistent bat that gets on base higher than the 265 clip. I like Odor as a person, as a teammate, as a clutch guy in some of these. Look, in this 8-game winning streak, you could pick 3 or 4 games that the Orioles don't win without Rougned Odor, but you also don't know that Terrin Vavra doesn't come up big in those same situations. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Orioles do at the trade deadline here, whether they get rid of Odor, whether they trade Mancini, whether they trade Santander or Lyles or a bullpen piece. Something's happening. Something's going to come. Whether we like it or not, that remains to be seen. It's up to the Orioles to make it really, really tough for Mike Elias to figure out what he's going to do here in about 3 weeks. So, guys, anything else before we sign off for the night?
I have one thing.
Best you've ever looked.
Go Birds, baby.
Best you've ever looked. What you didn't tell people about that night, Ryan, is that you said you were going to buy a jersey of the guy who hit the home run for the Orioles. You bought an Adley Rutschman jersey. Please tell me you didn't buy it at the stadium, because I saw the prices of those jerseys, man, and it made me want to vomit.
Ooh.
Yeah, I bought it at the stadium.
Oh,
I wasn't gonna. I had to get the real thing, man. I haven't bought a real jersey since JJ Hardy, so
Yeah.
I kind of had to. I had texted Megan and I said, if a player, the next player who goes yard, and I gave her Rutschman, Hayes, Mountcastle, and Mullins. I said the next of these 4 guys who hits a homer while I'm at the game, because I knew I was coming the following night too. I said I'll get their jersey, and Rutschman homer in his first at bat. After that half inning, I walked to the team store, grabbed a jersey. Figured if I'm going to spend that much for a jersey, I might as well get the chain too.
You
And
just,
here we are.
You just spent a car payment on 2 pieces of clothing, basically.
You know what? My car's paid off. I might as well treat myself once in a while.
Hey, you know what? It's justifiable then. If you don't have a car payment, go spend a couple $100 on a jersey and a home run chain. I'm right there with you, man. John, what do you got for us before we sign off?
Yeah, make sure you guys tune into our show next Monday. After the draft happens, you guys are going to want to tune into the show when we talk about what happened with the Orioles with the draft. There'll be All-Star break is coming up, so they'll be into the Home Run Derby, they'll be into the All-Star game and all that stuff. But we'll talk about what we think is going to happen with all of that. And yeah, make sure you tune in next Monday.
Yeah, no, next Monday is going to be a great show. I think we're going to air at 6 o'clock again, because the Home Run Derby starts at 8, and we want people to actually watch our show. So I think 6 o'clock is probably what's going to happen next week. My final thought before we sign off here, Jorge Lopez, first-time All-Star, 1.79 ERA, 16 saves for the Orioles. He is deserving. There's a couple Orioles that also were deserving, and what sucks is they're in playoff contention, and they still only got 1 representative. Look, Austin Hayes, 3 for 38 this month. He was getting national recognition and then went ice cold. He got the day off yesterday, another day off today. Hopefully that gets that wrist healed up a little bit, and he can come in starting in the first game of that Cubs series tomorrow and get himself back on track offensively. Cedric Mullins, you can make a gripe about him. Ryan Mountcastle, Trey Mancini. I mean, Cedric Mullins is already a 3-win player, and it's the beginning of July. So, look, the Orioles have a lot of talent, and they got a lot of talent coming, and we're seeing it now. And I think everybody would agree that this is earlier than we expected to see them playing this kind of baseball. But it is a ton of fun. It makes these shows that much more fun, and like Ryan said, it makes the losses hurt that much more. Go O's. We're excited for what they're doing. Hopefully it continues. But even if it doesn't, probably the most fun we've had watching Orioles baseball in at least 5 or 6 years. And probably, if they continue on this trend, it's going to be up there with 89 and 2012 in the annals of Orioles history as far as people's favorite seasons of all time with this ball club. Guys, for Ryan Blake and for Jon Shearer, I'm Paul Valle. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Oh, What a Show.